Hey there, everybody, it's Russ. Welcome back to another live stream. And we've got a special guest with you guys. We have a special guest for you guys tonight. It's James from Analog Cycles. And I think few bike shops have cultivated the aura of mystique and mystery as James has around Analog. Does he actually live in the yurt? All these wild stories about James and his bike shop. And we're going to talk to him about that, but also his new components that he's putting out, the 0mm stem, and some other interesting ideas that he has. But before we jump in, again, I want to thank all our Patreon supporters for making this content possible. A lot of them are in the Zoom room. And yeah, thanks, guys. So with all that said, let's welcome to the YouTube channel, James. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, I'm really excited to be here. I've never done anything like this before, so I'm scared. I'm excited to be here.
The bike shop's name is Analog Cycles, so outside your comfort zone.
Totally, yeah. I've had a lot of folks recently ask if I'll do Zoom bike fits, and I say no. Well, let's just keep it with paper. Let's keep it basic. Send me an email. Yeah, right. But no, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. Okay. So first, I want to dispel some rumors. True or false? The bike shop is in a yurt.
So the bike shop is in an old sugar house that my great uncle built to produce maple syrup in. And he timber framed the whole thing, built it out of local hemlock, and it's 360 square feet, so it's really small. And the sugar house itself is totally off the grid. We use a generator and cell phone hotspots. And then Candace and I live on the same property in a yurt that was built in New Hampshire, just down the road. And then our buddy Mark, who was our only other employee, lives in like an old trapper style wall tent on the property, and everyone's off the grid. No electricity proper. We all use wood heat. Even the shop uses wood heat. So that's the story there.
So what made you want to open a bike shop there?
So I used to own a bike shop there was a bike shop, espresso bar called Gravel and Grind, just outside of DC in Frederick, Maryland. And it was a lot of fun, but it had become more of an espresso shop. Like we would have lines out the door for people doing espresso and coming in to get espresso or food. And it was cool. It was really cool that was happening, but I really wanted a bike shop and not to do dishes all day.
Right.
And so despite of that shop's success, I said, I want to get back to my roots, and I want to make sure that I can just focus on bikes. And I really want to be able to make sure I can pursue only what I'm interested in. So that meant to me paying no rent, paying very low overhead for everything, not having a mortgage for a house or a shop over my head. And I had this property in Vermont that was willed to me. And I said, I think we can just try to make this happen. And turns out the time was right. The steel bikes were, which is all I've ever tried to sell. Steel bikes were like super, super hot. Gravel bikes, which I've been into for years and years, were super hot. And so it all kind of worked out that Analog's working really well.
Right. So are you close enough to population centers that's where you attract business, or is it mostly online, or are you just like a destination that people make the pilgrimage to?
So it's everything. We have, unfortunately, not a ton of local people. I think Vermont's very much sort of a word of mouth place, and maybe in 5 years, lots of locals will come. But over half of our customers are from New York City. But unlike a typical online shop, people come up to us. They drive up, or they take the train up. They get a bike fit. They talk about a bunch of fun stuff. They go camp with us. They ride with us. We get a feel for what they need, and then we build a bike for them, and we correspond online. And so it starts with this sort of in-person conversation. So if someone comes from Boston or Albany or New York City, I would say that probably most of our customers are 4+ hours away, but they make a special trip up to come. So it's pretty fun.
So how did people, hear from you?
In terms of how did they hear? Go ahead.
How did they hear of the shop? Like, is it just through Instagram or you?
I have no idea. I really have no idea. I guess Instagram, but I really don't know. It's all a kind of a mystery to me. I will say that we put. I think our website has a much broader reach than most shops because it's so verbose, and so for a lot of things that maybe a gravel rider would be interested in searching, we rank #1 on Google because our articles and our product descriptions are so ridiculously long that we just turn up first. So maybe that's how people find out about it. But if maybe I don't know really beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the way I first discovered you guys was actually a blog post you wrote about trail, because it kind of jived with my own experience. You proposed that low trail wasn't the purpose of bike design, but it was trying to solve the problem of toe overlap. And I love the analogy that you use. Low trail bikes they tend to be a little bit over responsive, and it would be like going to buy a car and the car salesman telling you, the car ride's great, but it's got to be full of passengers.
Yeah. So I mean, my thought on the whole low trail thing is that I grew up riding high trail or mid trail bikes, specialized 26-inch mountain bikes in the 90s, and they handled really, I would say, neutrally with or without a load. And I don't really understand the justification for a bike that only handles well in one circumstance when there's already design on the market that handles pretty darn neutrally, no matter what you do to it. And so I was thinking, because we're developing our own bikes and our own fork crowns and lugs, and I see how expensive that is, I'm sure that in 1920 it was super expensive as well. And so I'm not saying that I'm right, but I think the hypothesis is as valid as anyone else's hypothesis, that it was developed to work around existing lug sets because lugs were so expensive to develop. Obviously inflation has changed pricing, but it was still probably expensive to get castings done, maybe more so than it is today. So that's kind of my nutshell take on that. It's not that they're evil bikes. It's just that if you don't have to deal with that nonsense, well, why are you dealing with that nonsense?
So on your website, you've got the tagline, subverting the paradigm. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think that the paradigm, whether it's with gravel bikes or with standard mountain bikes, is to go with whatever the market forces are telling you to go with. So if that's for mountain bikes, it's increasingly steep seat angles, increasingly slack head angles. For gravel bikes, it's kind of working within the existing paradigm of maybe a 42 tooth front ring and then a 1142 in the back and a carbon fork. For where I live, none of that is valid stuff. It's like the worst thing you could possibly have. And so our idea is to sort of take this dominant paradigm and flip it on its head for more versatility, more utility, more safety, more longevity, like screw disposable stuff. We want stuff that's going to last. And things that last and things that are practical are not part of the dominant paradigm, unfortunately.
So would you consider yourself a retro grouch?
No, I mean, I think that there are certain things that I like that are older, but I like disc brakes. I like tubeless tires. I think contemporary rim profiles blow the pants off of old rim profiles. I like oversized steel tubing. I like stiff frames. But I don't think that liking steel frames is a retro grouch thing. There's 2,400 plus years of development behind steel frames, or behind steel rather, not steel frames. And no other material comes close to that level of development. Whatever it is, aluminum was the 1800s, titanium was, I think, the 1930s. Carbon, realistically, is the 1970s. Steel has a multi-millennium gap, or a head start on those materials. That's not being a retro grouch. That's being a futurist. So, That's kind of my thought on that.
Matured technology.
Yeah, right. Yeah, things that are proven and that work really well. And there's no other material that can be dented, bent, scratched, or braided, re-welded like steel can. Titanium can't, aluminum can't, carbon certainly can't. I think that the material of the future happens to be the material of the past as well.
Right. Another article that I read recently, which totally jived with my own experience, was your explanation of mountain bike bars, how they developed, and how ultimately the flat bar might not be the best option for a lot of people because of ergonomics.
Yeah. I mean, the mountain bike bar came out of motocross bikes, and motocross bikes are ridden super hard, super fast, with huge machines that weigh hundreds of pounds, that are going at incredible rates of speed with incredible torque. And for some reason, we've thought that it's applicable to mount that handlebar on our 22-pound mountain bikes, which is insane. The speeds aren't the same. The handling characteristics don't need to be the same. So I don't think that drop bars are for everybody, but I think a lot more people, if they got their drop bars at the right height, and at the right reach, and all the other sort of characteristics came together, a lot more people would be better off with drop bars or dirt drop bars. And the rest of the people that aren't pro downhill racers would be better off with an alt bar, like a Jones bar or a Surly Mo Loco. And I can't do it right now because of the sort of our interface here, but if people at home, if they kind of just put their hands at their sides, like if you stand up and put your hands loose at your sides, and you look at the position your palms end up, it's about a 45-degree angle. And that is what an alt bar uses. It's roughly a 40-degree back sweep, whereas a mountain bike bar is more like a 9-degree back sweep or something like that. And that's a really uncomfortable. Your shoulders go up like this, and you look like kind of like an idiot when you're riding around on the trails. But an alt bar lets you kind of relax a lot more. So.
Yeah, I get accused of being a drop bar elitist on the YouTube channel because I don't review any like flat bar bikes. But it's not because I don't, I'm not open to flat bars. It's all the years of editing video and just computer work. When I put my hands on a flat bar bike for any length of time, I just get shooting pains going up my forearm. And recently, as in like yesterday, I swapped the drop bars on my polyvalent with granola bars and took it out for a today, and it was like magical.
yeah. I mean, they can be good, and there's there's good grips out there. There's good bends to bars, but I think that a lot of just like with pro road racing, a lot of what we see with handlebar design has no basis in logic or bike fit or ergonomics. It's like, what does Jim the pro downhill dude ride? Well, I clearly need that to ride my local mellow cross country stuff or go get a beer or whatever it is. And it doesn't actually make any sense. We don't drive F1 cars to go to Stewart's to get donuts, and you shouldn't do the same with a bike. You shouldn't copy the downhill guys necessarily.
Right. So you have this whole section on your website about Enlightened Fit. Like, describe that.
So I used to be a bike fitter at a pretty normal bike shop. And we sold Cervelos, and we sold Treks, and we sold Cannondales. And we had this thing called a Guru Fit machine, which you might be familiar with, or your viewers might be familiar with. But it's, in a nutshell, it's basically this robotic fitting machine that you can change fit parameters in real time. So you can move handlebars out or down or up on an XY axis, and the same with the saddle. And you can measure someone's power output, and it'll change in real time as their fit changes. So Alyssa, that was just on here earlier, has had one of those Guru Fits, and we dialed it in by moving her bars out or up or in or out. And it's like an eyeglass test, an A/B test. Is this better or is this better? And after doing that for years, I realized that people's fits would only sort of, that machine could only optimize people's fits as power was increased. In other words, it was really easy to dial in someone's fit if they were working really hard on the machine. And you could easily see their power go up, and their sort of their quote unquote comfort increase if they were pushing insane watts that you would never push on a regular ride.
Mhm.
But that is the basis of most fitting. It's performance and it's about speed. And it's not about like looking at raccoons climbing a tree, or checking out snapping turtles, or just being happy on your bike. All of that information I learned after years of doing those performance fits, and sort of said, okay, well, there are some constants. What can we take as a constant, but then optimize it for comfort and for fun rather than for performance. So the enlightened fitting process is, how can you be efficient on your bike, but also want to ride your bike all day and then get on it the next day. And it's a fairly different paradigm than like a traditional retool or guru fit would be. But it's cool because I can do it online. I can use people's photographs and their measurements to do it, to really kind of get them just a lot more comfortable, a lot more happy.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the interesting things. Like, I got a fit recently, and I've actually been denied fits at various bike shops because I don't clip in. They're like, we can't do it. There's no axis from which, there's no XY like coordinate or Cartesian coordinate we can build the fit around. It's like, so does that mean, all the millions of people that don't clip in, can't get a fit?
It's ridiculous.
You got to be a little bit more creative than that.
Yeah. An interesting thing that I was able to do when I had that Guru Fit machine is I sustained a foot injury, and I wasn't able to ride in clipless pedals. So I spent about a year on platforms, and that was kind of my aha moment. Platforms make all your foot pain go away. They can help with knee pain. But after my foot injury, because I was in this culture that sort of said, clip in, I got back on clipless. But with the Guru Fit machine, I was able to test my efficiency, my power output with platforms and with clipless. No freaking difference.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear
that. and that's been born. That's not just me. There's been, who's those people that make those really long pedals? VP. Is it? Oh, okay. Maybe so. They're like VP not knockoffs, or gigantic VP pedals.
Right.
They've either referred to or have done the testing on that as well. And basically, unless you're a pro level sprinter, the clipless pedal does very little for your pedal stroke, which I like to hear because I really like to ride in sandals or whatever.
Yeah, I did a YouTube video on the channel recently, just like last week, where I rode a hill 6 times, 3 times clipped in, 3 times on flats.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it was pretty close, but I found that I was actually a little bit quicker on flat pedals. It might be just because that's what I'm more accustomed to. And the comments were like, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Well, it's to me, it's a no-brainer. If you are into science and numbers and contacts patches and all that, if you were to just think about what you're applying power through, if you're applying power through a SPD clip, cleat, it's this big, it's the size of a quarter. There's no way that power transfer is as efficient as stepping on a pedal that's this big. It's to me, it's a kind of a no-brainer. Even with a soft shoe, if there's some deflection in that shoe, that big pedal is going to allow you to put power down more efficiently. That's why road pedals are bigger than mountain pedals, is for power transfer. And if that logic holds true for road pedals, well, then why wouldn't it hold true for platform pedals?
Right. So let's talk about drop bars, because you alluded to setting up drop bars. I think most new cyclists, when they see the curly bars, they're like, "Oh, those aren't for me because I don't race," And I think for the most part, bike marketing doesn't help that, because usually when a bike is shown, it's like super slammed. The saddle's like a foot above the drop bar. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that you're absolutely right. The marketing wants people to ride in this aggressive pro position, and the degree to which that pro position is like Ultra Slam today is relatively new. It was not that way in the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, because pros rode in the drops and now they just ride in the hoods. So it's a relatively new idea that there's like this crazy disproportionate setup between the saddle and the handlebar. But we never sell bikes with handlebars below the saddle, because if you look at a drop bar and you level the saddle and the handlebar, the drop portion of the bar is still way below the saddle. So you still can have a super aggressive position. Even if your handlebars, the top of your handlebar is higher than your saddle, your drop is still lower. So if this is your drop and this is your saddle, this is still a pretty aggressive position. And I don't think that anybody's really thinking about that, because they just think about the hoods. Like, how do I feel on the hoods? Well, right. The hoods are only part of the bar. I've talked to so many cyclists. I mean, 9 out of 10 fits I do, people are like, I might as well not have the bottom portion of the drop bar. I'm like, well, why do you have it? Well, if you're going to have it, raise your freaking bars up, you use that section. And I think that for the most part, when people do that, when they raise their bars and often reduce the reach, they find that the bar is much more useful, much more comfortable, and they can actually get more power for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So
I found that through my experience. I've gradually raised it up just so that the drops are actually in a functional place.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much internet pushback. I feel like a lot of people have been kind of brainwashed into thinking there's only one setup and it's what the pros use, and it's awesome. That's what you're doing, but there's other ways to fit a bike.
Totally. And I think that the thing that people forget is, one, that pros primarily ride in the hoods, and they get in the drops for descents primarily, where they don't need to breathe a lot. They can just kind of sit there and recover. So if you're riding in this crunched down position, especially if you're not in pro shape, like Benedict is like super rail thin and Nam's super rail thin, and they're great athletes, but I'm not personally. I just like to ride my bike. And if you're carrying like 10 to 20 extra pounds around your waist and you try to bend into a pro position, you cannot breathe. And how efficient is not breathing? I mean, that's like, how long can that last? And as such, yeah. I mean, maybe for a sprint or something, but I think raising the bar, you can breathe a lot better. A lot of your neck pain and your shoulder pain goes away. Your hand pressure goes away, and you don't have to run your saddle tilted down like this. Like, number one thing I see in bad fits is saddles tilted down so you slide off the front. Oh, it's always indicative of a bar that's too low. Your saddle should be level, or if it's a Brooks, maybe nose up a little bit. Right. A lot of bad misinformation out there.
Right. Well, let's talk about components, because not only do you have a bike shop in the Sugar Shack, you're also developing components and possibly a frame. So how did that happen?
So basically, it started by trying to just rethink how things are currently being made, and saying, okay, we like a lot of X, Y, and Z, but we find that there's room for improvement, and being really big fans of history, whether it's like just nerd history or bike history. I was fascinated by these old turn of the last century bikes that were 1890s, 1905 kind of bikes, and those people were riding these bikes that this was before paved roads were prevalent. They had to ride on terrible roads, which is exactly what I ride on, just like the worst possible road surface. And I started to look at those bikes and say, what do these all have in common? This short stem, the front wheels way out in front. They don't have super short chain stays. They have relatively high bottom brackets to keep the cranks out of the gook. And I said, well, I wonder if that would translate to if that worked for them, they could put bikes together at any angle they wanted to, because they weren't using lugs yet. Mm-hmm. Would it make sense to make a bike that does that? And so that was kind of the foundation for Tanglefoot Cycles, and and then Discord components, which is going to be stems, handlebars, seat posts, that kind of stuff. It just was going to be the sort of the supporting componentry for that.
Sure.
And it was just sort of out of frustration for no one else seeming to be interested in solving these problems, or what we saw as these problems of bikes that just don't do well in really terrible conditions. Bad toe clip. I hate toe clip overlap. It's like the stupidest thing in the world. Like bad toe clip overlap, low bottom brackets, low trail, flexi frames, all that stuff. I wanted to bring a bike out that just said, no, all that's going away. So.
Let's talk about I think one of your most eye-catching components is the 0 millimeter stem. Like, what kind of bike that one? So what kind of bike does that go on, and how does having, I guess, no reach on the stem affect handling?
So we originally developed that stem so we have this frame set that's going to be coming out hopefully later this year. That's been in prototype in Taiwan for forever, but it's called the Moonshiner. It's a bike packing bike, and we developed that stem because we wanted to sell that frame set as frame, fork, and a stem, and there was no 0 millimeter offset stem on the market, so we had to develop one. But we also knew that stem would work for folks who are converting mountain bikes to drop bars. So, long front triangle, they wanted to throw drop bars on there. And a lot of these mountain bikes are just so long in the front, there's no way that they could put even, a 35 millimeter stem on there and have proper reach. And we also knew that those same people would probably need extra height to get their bars to the right height. So that was kind of how that stem developed. We needed one, so we developed it, and we knew that it'd be sort of cross usability. And the other thing that really, to me, made sense is that this is generalization, but it's fit hundreds of people. Generally, women have shorter torsos than guys do. They have generally longer legs. Not all of them. Everyone, there's exceptions, but generally women have shorter torsos, but they have to, if you follow traditional bike sizing, especially for road bikes, you have to size down with the frame. And then that means your stack height gets reduced, and all sorts of other bad stuff happens. You get a steep seat angle, you get a slack head angle, you get a higher bottom bracket, none of which is good on a road bike. And we said, well, what if women could ride a bigger frame, but just reduce the reach of the stem enough that they could kind of ride their appropriate sized frame? And that sort of tied in with our thinking on that as well. So on the handling, the first time we did it, we did it with a quill stem. This is fairly close to what the quill stem looked like. And it was a 0 millimeter quill stem. I thought it was going to handle, I just guessed I was probably going to handle like crap, but we just had one made just to see. And it handled really, really well. I put it on a Rivendell. It felt great. Everyone that rode it was like, wow, it feels really, really good. Doesn't feel twitchy. It just feels like the reach has been reduced. And that's how we knew, okay, well, this is a doable thing. This isn't just a 120-year-old whack idea. It's an idea that we can take forward. And so we did.
Work better with bikes with certain head tube angles?
I've ridden it on, I've not ridden it on super slack head tube angle bikes like downhill bikes, but I know that it would be fine because downhill bikes often have 0 millimeter stems, direct mount stems. But I've ridden it on road bikes, sort of like race style bikes with steep head tube angles. I've even ridden it on low trail bikes. I've ridden it down to handlebars about 42 centimeters wide. No adverse handling, even at really high rates of speed for descending a mountain pass or something like that. It is a little bit faster in the handling department when your hands are really close to the stem. So if you're in an aero tuck, you do want to be a little bit more mindful of your descending, but not any more so than you would be if you switched from a mountain bike to a road bike. I mean, it's not night and day. It's just, okay, this is moving a little bit faster than, a standard bike stem.
Does it benefit using a wider than normal drop bar?
So mathematically, yes, but in practice, I have not noticed. I recently switched on my Moonshiner prototype from a 46 to a 52 centimeter bar. I can't tell a qualifiable difference between the two.
Right.
So yeah, again, mathematically probably so, but.
Cool. Well, I think I'm going to open up to questions here. I'm going to go to Zoom. So if you've got a question, raise the blue hand. It looks like YouTube is super laggy, which is kind of a bummer, but we'll go to Zoom. So any questions in Zoom? All right. We've got one from Brian. You've got the floor.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about your preference for steel. Is there one type of steel over another that you prefer, or all steels created the same?
Yeah, so all steels are not created the same, but I like stiff